My name is Flora Wilson, and at 67 years old, I never imagined I would be homeless. When my only son James died suddenly of a heart attack at 42, my world shattered completely. But nothing prepared me for what came next. Just days after we buried him, my daughter-in-law Amanda looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Don't be dramatic, Flora. Pack your bags and learn to survive." I ended up living in my car for 2 weeks until my son's lawyer called with news about a secret clause and $7 million that changed everything. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments and hit subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding strength in the darkest moments. For 40 years, I taught third grade at Pinewood Elementary in Portland. I loved every minute of it, watching generations of children grow and learn. My husband Thomas and I had a simple but happy life in our modest home. We had only one child, our James, who was the light of our lives from the moment he was born. Thomas passed away 8 years ago after a difficult battle with pancreatic cancer, leaving just James and me. James grew up to be everything a mother could hope for in a son. He was kind, intelligent, and hardworking. After graduating with honors from the University of Oregon, he built a successful career as an investment consultant. He always made time for me despite his busy schedule, calling every other day and making sure we had dinner together at least once a week. After Thomas died, James became my rock, my confidant, my best friend. Then Amanda came into his life. They met at a charity fundraiser 6 years ago. She was 12 years younger than him, strikingly beautiful, with long auburn hair and a dazzling smile. James was smitten immediately. I remember him calling me that night, his voice filled with excitement as he described meeting this incredible woman who worked in pharmaceutical sales. Their courtship was a whirlwind, and within 2 years they were planning their wedding. I was genuinely happy for my son. Amanda seemed to make him happy, and that was all that mattered to me. The wedding was 4 years ago, an elegant affair at the Rosewood Gardens. Amanda had exquisite taste, and everything was picture perfect. "Mom, she makes me feel complete," James told me as we shared a quiet moment before the ceremony. "I think Dad would have liked her too." I nodded, blinking back tears. He would have loved anyone who made you this happy. After the wedding, James and Amanda purchased a beautiful Victorian house in the historic district of Portland. It had a lovely garden apartment in the back, and when James suggested I sell my home and move in there after Thomas died, I was touched by the offer. It made financial sense too, as my teacher's pension and Social Security weren't stretching as far as they used to with rising costs. "It's perfect," Mom James insisted. "You'll have your independence, but we'll be close enough to help each other out." And for a while, it was perfect. I adored my garden apartment with its private entrance and small patio where I could tend to my flowers. When Lucas was born 3 years ago, I was overjoyed to become a grandmother and treasured being able to help care for him while James and Amanda worked. I would watch Lucas several afternoons a week, and we developed a special bond. He had his father's curious eyes and gentle temperament. Our family routine was comfortable. I cooked Sunday dinners for all of us, traditional recipes that Thomas had loved. James would bring a nice bottle of wine, and even Amanda seemed to enjoy these gatherings, though she was often distracted by her phone or work concerns. The last truly happy memory I have was James's 42nd birthday, just 2 weeks before his death. I made his favorite chocolate cake, the same recipe I had used since he was a little boy. Lucas helped me decorate it with blue frosting, his small fingers carefully placing candles on top. Daddy Blow Lucas giggled as James pretended to struggle with all the candles. After dinner, while Amanda was putting Lucas to bed, James and I sat on the patio with glasses of whiskey, something we rarely did. "Mom, I wanted to let you know I updated my will recently," he said, his expression serious. "James, you're too young to worry about such things," I protested. He shook his head. "It's just being responsible. I want to make sure you and Lucas are taken care of no matter what." He paused, seeming to consider saying more, but then just smiled and changed the subject. Looking back, I wish I had asked more questions. I had noticed some tension between James and Amanda in the months leading up to his death. Small disagreements strained silences, Amanda working later and later. But I dismissed it as normal marital stress, especially with demanding careers and a young child. James never complained, so I never pried. How could I have known that this birthday celebration would be our last together? That the life we had built was about to crumble around me in ways I could never have imagined. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was reading to Lucas, his small body curled against mine as we explored the adventures of a curious monkey. My phone rang and I almost ignored it, not wanting to interrupt our story time. Something made me reach for it, though, and I will forever be grateful that I did. Mrs. Wilson. An unfamiliar voice, tense and clinical. This is Portland Memorial Hospital. Your son James Wilson has been brought in. You should come right away. The world tilted sideways. I remember stammering questions that the voice on the phone couldn't answer. Something about James collapsing at work. Something about cardiac arrest. The words washed over me without fully registering. I called Amanda immediately. She was in the middle of a sales presentation 2 hours away and said she would leave right away. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial my neighbor Sarah to ask if she could watch Lucas until Amanda's parents could arrive. The drive to the hospital was a blur. I ran 3 red lights and parked haphazardly in the emergency lot. The automatic doors slid open too slowly as I rushed into the sterile brightness of the emergency room. James Wilson, I gasped to the receptionist. My son. Her face changed, softened with pity, and my heart plummeted before the doctor even approached. I knew. Somehow I knew. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Dr. Reeves. A tall woman with kind eyes and a stethoscope draped around her neck took my elbow, guiding me to a small private room off the main waiting area. Please sit down. Just tell me, I whispered. Your son suffered a massive heart attack at his office. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, we were unable to revive him. I'm so very sorry, but James passed away about 20 minutes ago. The words hit me like physical blows. My son, my beautiful, vibrant, 42-year-old son, gone, just like that. No warning, no goodbye. No chance to tell him one more time how proud I was of him, how much I loved him. I don't remember much of the next few hours. Friends arrived, faces blurring together in a haze of tears and murmured condolences. Sarah brought Lucas to the hospital, not understanding what had happened, but sensing something was terribly wrong. I held him close, inhaling his sweet child scent, seeing James in his eyes. Amanda arrived 4 hours later. Her face was pale, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, but she was remarkably composed. While I was falling apart, she was already on her phone, making calls about funeral arrangements and asking nurses about death certificates. Have you contacted the life insurance company? She asked, a hospital administrator, her voice steady and businesslike. We need to know what documentation they require. I was too numb to be bothered by her practicality then. People grieve differently, I told myself. Maybe this was her way of coping with the shock. The days that followed were a nightmare of decisions and arrangements. Amanda and I disagreed about several aspects of the funeral. James had once mentioned wanting to be cremated with his ashes scattered at our family's favorite camping spot at Mount Hood, but Amanda insisted on a traditional burial at Evergreen Cemetery. It's more appropriate, she said firmly when I brought up his wishes. More dignified. And Lucas needs a place to visit his father. I didn't have the strength to argue. Every morning I woke up thinking it had all been a terrible dream, only to be crushed anew by the reality that my son was gone forever. The funeral was a beautiful but surreal affair. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. James had been well liked and respected in the community. His colleagues spoke of his integrity and brilliance. His college friends shared stories that made us laugh through our tears. I stood at the front of the church, Lucas's small hand in mine, both of us in uncomfortable black clothes, receiving condolences from an endless line of mourners. Amanda stayed close to her parents throughout the service. They had arrived from Chicago the day after James died and taken charge of many of the arrangements. I barely knew them, having met them only at the wedding and twice during holidays. They were wealthy, reserved people who had never quite warmed to James or me. At the reception following the burial, I overheard a conversation that should have alarmed me more than it did at the time. The market is hot right now, Amanda's father was saying quietly. You could list the house next month and be settled in Chicago before summer. I know, Amanda replied. I just need to figure out what to do about Flora. They noticed me then, and quickly changed the subject, but the seed of unease had been planted. Still, grief clouded my judgment. I couldn't imagine that Amanda would make any major decisions so soon after James's death. In the days that followed, Amanda became increasingly distant. She spent long hours on the phone in her bedroom with the door closed. When I offered to help with Lucas or household chores, she politely but firmly declined. We're fine, Flora. You should focus on your own grief. Lucas became my only comfort. He didn't understand that his daddy wasn't coming back, and his innocent questions broke my heart anew each time. When Daddy come home, he would ask, his big brown eyes so like his father's. Daddy can't come home, sweetheart, I would explain gently. But he loved you very much, and he's watching over you from heaven. Amanda began restricting my time with Lucas, claiming he needed routine and normalcy, not constant reminders of his loss. I tried to respect her decisions as his mother, even as it felt like losing a piece of James all over again. 1 week after the funeral, I was tending to my small herb garden when an unfamiliar car pulled into the driveway. Amanda emerged with a woman in a crisp suit carrying a portfolio. This is the garden apartment I mentioned, Amanda was saying as they approached. Approximately 600 square feet separate entrance currently occupied, but that can be addressed. I stood brushing soil from my knees, confusion turning to disbelief as I realized this stranger was a real estate agent. Amanda, I called out. What's going on? She looked startled to see me outside, then quickly composed herself. Flora, this is Denise Mercer from Portland Luxury Realty. She's just doing a preliminary assessment of the property. You're selling the house. My voice sounded small even to my own ears. So soon. Can we discuss this later? Amanda's smile was tight as she guided the realtor toward the main house. That evening, after Lucas was asleep, Amanda sat me down at the kitchen table. Her face was set in lines of determination that made her look much older than her 34 years. I've decided to sell the house and move back to Chicago, she announced without preamble. My parents think it's best for Lucas and me to have family support right now. But this is Lucas's home, I protested. James's home. Don't you think major decisions should wait until we've had time to grieve? Amanda's expression hardened. I need to move on quickly, Flora. This house has too many memories. It's suffocating me. What about me? I asked, my voice trembling. This is my home too. The garden apartment was always temporary, she replied coolly. A favor James did for you. I need to maximize the sale value of the property, which means selling it unoccupied. The conversation deteriorated from there. Amanda had clearly made up her mind, and my objections fell on deaf ears. Over the next few days, more strangers tramped through the house and garden apartment, assessing, measuring, making notes. I felt like an intruder in my own home. Worse than the impending loss of my home was Amanda's increasing restrictions on my time with Lucas. Where I had previously watched him several times a week, she now claimed he was enrolled in a full-time daycare program. It's better for him to be around other children, she explained when I asked to take him to the park. The grief counselor says too much time with you reminds him too much of his dad. I doubted any grief counselor had said such a thing, but I had no way to verify it. My heart broke a little more each time Lucas called out Gamma when he glimpsed me, only to be hurried away by Amanda or her mother. Then I came home one afternoon to find many of my personal belongings had been packed into boxes and moved to the garage. Photo albums, books, kitchenware, even the quilt Thomas's mother had made for our wedding, all stacked haphazardly on the concrete floor. I took the liberty of starting to pack for you, Amanda explained when confronted. The real estate agent says we need to depersonalize the space for showings. You had no right to touch my things, I said, fighting back tears of anger and humiliation. Actually, I have every right. This is my house now. Amanda's parents moved in temporarily to help with the transition, as they put it. Her father, Gerald, a retired corporate lawyer, seemed to take pleasure in explaining the legal realities of my situation. The house was in James's name, and as his widow, Amanda inherits everything he informed me over breakfast one morning. There was no formal lease agreement for the garden apartment, just a family arrangement that unfortunately ended with James's passing. 2 weeks after the funeral, the other shoe finally dropped. Amanda invited me to dinner, which should have been a warning sign itself, as we had barely spoken in days except about Lucas or household logistics. The meal was takeout from an expensive restaurant served on the good china. Amanda's parents sat on either side of her, a united front. Lucas had already been put to bed. I picked at my salmon appetite, non-existent, waiting for whatever was coming. Flora, Amanda began setting down her fork. I need you to move out by the end of the week. Even though I had suspected this was coming, the bluntness of it knocked the wind from me. 2 days, that's all the notice you're giving me. We've found a buyer who wants to close quickly. They're paying cash and waiving inspections, but they want possession immediately. But where am I supposed to go? I asked, my voice rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. I gave up my house to move in here. All my money went into helping James with the down payment for this place. That was your choice, Gerald interjected coldly. Legally, it was a gift, not an investment. I turned to Amanda, pleading. Please, I just need a little more time to figure things out. A month, even a few weeks. Her face remained impassive. Then came the words that would haunt me for weeks to come. Don't be dramatic, Flora. James is gone. Pack your bags and learn to survive on your own. The cruelty of it stole my breath. This woman, who had been my daughter-in-law for 4 years, who had smiled and called me mom, who had trusted me with her child, was now treating me like an unwanted houseguest. What about Lucas? I asked, my voice breaking. He needs his grandmother. Lucas will be fine, Amanda replied. We're moving to Chicago next month. My parents have found an excellent preschool for him there. You're taking him away. Panic rose in my chest. But he's all I have left of James. He's my son, Amanda said coldly. And I need to do what's best for him. I spent that night sobbing into my pillow, trying to muffle the sound so Lucas wouldn't hear. By morning, I had no more tears left, just a hollow ache in my chest and the beginning of a plan. I would find a small apartment, get a part-time job to supplement my pension, and fight for visitation rights with Lucas. I was, after all, his only remaining blood relative. But Amanda had other ideas. I spent the next day frantically packing my belongings, my hands shaking so badly I dropped and broke several cherished mementos. With each item I wrapped in newspaper, another memory surfaced. The crystal vase James had given me for Mother's Day, the collection of smooth stones Lucas and I had gathered at the beach, Thomas's favorite coffee mug that I'd kept all these years. Around noon, I realized I needed to check my finances. James had helped me set up online banking years ago, but I rarely looked at it, trusting him to keep an eye on things for me. I logged in, expecting to see the modest savings I'd accumulated from my pension. The screen loaded. My checking account showed a balance of $117. The savings account, which should have contained nearly $15,000, showed just over $800. Panic gripped me. This had to be a mistake. I called the bank immediately. Mrs. Wilson, according to our records, you made several large withdrawals over the past 6 months, the representative explained. The most recent was for $5,000 on April 3rd. That's impossible. I never made those withdrawals. They were made using your online banking credentials, ma'am. All the security questions were answered correctly. April 3rd was 2 days after James's funeral. Someone had emptied my account while I was drowning in grief. And I had a sickening suspicion who that someone was. I confronted Amanda that evening, my hands trembling with rage and fear. Did you access my bank accounts? Did you take my money? She didn't even bother to deny it. James gave me your information years ago in case of emergency. Consider the withdrawals repayment for all the free rent you've enjoyed. That money was all I had. My voice rose to a shout. How am I supposed to find a new place to live now? Not my problem, she replied coldly. You worked for 40 years. Surely you have a teacher's pension. I did have my pension, but it barely covered my basic expenses each month. The The savings had been my emergency fund, my security blanket. And now it was gone. With no money for a security deposit and first month's rent, my options evaporated. I called every friend I could think of, but coincidentally, many were traveling or had health issues or family staying with them. A few offered their couches for a night or two, but no one had room for a permanent guest, especially one with a car full of belongings. My former colleague Susan was in Europe for the summer. My church friend Marjorie was caring for her husband after his stroke. My neighbor from my old house had downsized to a studio apartment. Every call ended with the same sympathetic but unhelpful refrain. "I'm so sorry, Flora. I wish I could help." The deadline arrived. Amanda stood in the driveway, arms crossed, watching as I loaded the last of my possessions into my 10-year-old Toyota Camry. The back seat and trunk were stuffed with boxes and bags, leaving just enough room for me to see out the rear window. "Where's Lucas?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Can I say goodbye to him?" "He's napping," she replied, though I could hear him chattering happily inside the house. Another small cruelty in a growing collection. I got into my car, dignity the only thing I had left. "I'll be in touch about visiting Lucas," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Amanda's smile was cold. "We'll see." I drove aimlessly for hours, eventually finding myself in a Walmart parking lot as night fell. I'd heard that they sometimes allowed overnight parking, crawling into the reclined driver's seat surrounded by the remnants of my life. I spent my first night homeless at 67 years old. Morning brought new humiliations. I used the store bathroom to wash my face and brush my teeth, avoiding eye contact with other customers. I bought a cheap coffee from the McDonald's inside and sat for hours trying to formulate a plan. Each day developed a pattern. I would wake stiff and unrested, use public restrooms to maintain basic hygiene, then spend the day at libraries or malls, where I could sit without being disturbed. I nursed small coffees in fast food restaurants using their free Wi-Fi to search for housing I couldn't afford. At night, I would return to the Walmart lot or sometimes a hospital parking garage where my car wouldn't stand out. On the third day, I ran into Joan Peters, a parent of a former student at a grocery store. I was filling my water bottle at the drinking fountain when she recognized me. "Mrs. Wilson, how lovely to see you. How are you doing after, well, you know?" Her voice trailed off delicately. "I'm managing," I replied, attempting a smile. "Taking it day by day." "And where are you living now?" "I heard you were staying with James and his wife." The question hit like a physical blow. I couldn't bring myself to admit I was sleeping in my car. "I'm in transition right now," I said vaguely, considering my options. "Well, do let me know if you need anything," she said, with the casual insincerity of someone who never expected to be taken up on the offer. After she left, I sat in my car and sobbed until I gave myself a headache. The one bright spot came a week into my homelessness, when Amanda, perhaps feeling a flicker of guilt, allowed me to visit Lucas. I met them at a park, my heart lifting at the sight of his smiling face. "Gamma," he squealed, running into my arms. I held him tight, breathing in his sweet scent, memorizing the feel of his small body against mine. For 30 precious minutes, we played on the swings and shared ice cream. I was careful not to cry, not to say anything about missing him or James or our old life together. I wanted it to be a happy memory for both of us. As we prepared to leave, I asked Amanda when I could see him again. "I'll have to let you know," she said vaguely. "We're very busy with the move preparations." "Please," I said, hating the pleading in my voice. "He's all I have left." Something flickered in her eyes. For a moment I thought I saw the Amanda who had once smiled at family dinners, who had once thanked me tearfully for helping when Lucas had colic. But then the moment passed, and her expression hardened again. "I'll call you," she said, taking Lucas's hand. "Say goodbye to Grandma Lucas." "Bye, Gamma, love you." I watched them walk away, knowing in my heart it might be the last time I saw him. Amanda never called again. As the second week of homelessness began, my situation deteriorated further. A persistent cough developed from sleeping in the cold car. My arthritis flared from the cramped conditions. I rationed my meager funds carefully, but they were dwindling with each small purchase of food or gas. I considered driving to my sister Patricia's home in Florida, but the 2,000-mile journey would require gas money I didn't have, and our relationship had been strained for years. The thought of arriving on her doorstep homeless and broke was too humiliating to contemplate. Each night I would look at the photos of James and Lucas on my phone, my tether, to a life that seemed increasingly like a distant dream. Had I really once had a home, a family, a purpose? It seemed impossible as I huddled under a thin blanket in my car, jumping at every sound in the darkness. 2 weeks into my car living situation, I was parked behind a strip mall when a police officer tapped on my window, startling me awake. "Ma'am, you can't sleep here," he said, flashlight beam sweeping across my makeshift bed of blankets and pillows. "This is private property." "I'm sorry, officer." I mumbled, embarrassed and disoriented. "I'll move along." His face softened as he took in my age, the neat stacks of possessions, the teacher's calendar still hanging from my rearview mirror. This wasn't the typical homeless person he was used to rousing. "Are you okay, ma'am? Do you need me to call someone for you?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke me. "No, thank you. I'm fine. Just between permanent addresses at the moment." He hesitated, then handed me a card. "There's a women's shelter on Burnside that might have space. Tell them Officer Rivera sent you." I thanked him, but we both knew I wouldn't go. The shelter was for women fleeing abuse, for young mothers with nowhere else to turn. Not for retired school teachers who should have had their lives together by now. After he left, I drove to a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town. I ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a side of toast, and asked for extra hot water for my own tea bag. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a kind smile, brought me a full breakfast instead. "On the house," she whispered when I protested. "You look like you could use it." The unexpected kindness was my undoing. I made it to the restroom before the tears came, but once they started, I couldn't stop them. Sobs racked my body as I leaned against the sink, trying to muffle the sound with paper towels. The door opened, and the waitress, her name tag reading Justine, stepped in. Without a word, she put her arms around me, this stranger, and let me cry on her shoulder. "It's okay," she murmured. "Whatever it is, it's okay." When I could finally speak, the whole story poured out of me. James's death, Amanda's betrayal, the loss of my home, my savings, my grandson. The 2 weeks of living in my car, of washing in public restrooms, of pretending to former students' parents that everything was fine. Justine listened without interruption, without judgment. When I finished, she squeezed my hands. "My shift ends in an hour," she said. "I have a couch. It's not much, but it's yours for as long as you need it." "I can't impose," I protested weakly. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she replied firmly. "And I know my mama raised me better than to let a teacher sleep in her car when I have a perfectly good couch sitting empty." My pride warred with my desperation. 2 weeks of poor sleep, constant anxiety, and physical discomfort had taken their toll. The thought of a real shower, a proper bed, even if it was just a couch, was too tempting to resist. "Just for a night or two," I conceded. "Until I figure something out." Justine smiled. "Stay as long as you need. My daughter's off at college, so her room's empty anyway." That afternoon, as I sat on Justine's worn but clean couch, sipping real coffee from a real mug, my phone rang. The screen showed a number I vaguely recognized. "Mrs. Wilson. This is Robert Peterson, James's attorney." My heart skipped. I hadn't spoken to Mr. Peterson since a brief conversation at the funeral. "Yes, Mr. Peterson. How can I help you?" "I've been trying to reach you for several days," he said, his voice grave. "I went by the house, but the woman there, James's wife, said you'd moved and didn't leave a forwarding address." Of course, Amanda hadn't passed on any messages. "I've been in transition," I said, echoing my earlier lie to Joan Peters. "What can I do for you?" "It's rather what I can do for you, Mrs. Wilson. I need to speak with you urgently about James's estate. In person, if possible." "His estate." But I trailed off, confused. I'd rather not discuss details over the phone. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning? Say 9 o'clock. I glanced at Justine, who had overheard my side of the conversation and was nodding encouragingly. I'll be there, I promised. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. What could Mr. Peterson possibly want to discuss? Amanda had made it clear that she had inherited everything. Unless… It sounds important, Justine remarked, interrupting my thoughts. Do you need a ride downtown tomorrow? I calculated the bus fare in my head. $4 I could barely spare. That would be wonderful if it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all. I'm off tomorrow anyway. That night, for the first time in 2 weeks, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, lulled by the safety of 4 walls and the kindness of a stranger who was quickly becoming a friend. In the morning, I dressed in the nicest clothes I still had with me, a simple navy dress and cardigan. Justine loaned me a scarf that brightened the outfit. For luck, she said with a wink. The law offices of Peterson, Grimes, and Walsh occupied half a floor in a sleek downtown building. I felt out of place among the glass chrome and expensive suits, acutely aware of my wrinkled clothing and worn shoes. The receptionist led me to a conference room where Mr. Peterson was waiting. He was younger than I remembered, perhaps in his late 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for coming, he said, shaking my hand warmly. Please have a seat. I perched on the edge of a leather chair, hands clasped tightly in my lap. Mr. Peterson, I'm a bit confused about why I'm here. I understood that Amanda inherited everything when James passed. He frowned. That's what I wanted to discuss with you. You see, James came to see me 3 months before his death to make significant changes to his will and estate plan. He was very specific about his wishes. My heart began to race. What kind of changes? Mrs. Wilson, are you currently living in the garden apartment at the Portland house? The question caught me off guard. No, I admitted, shame coloring my cheeks. Amanda asked me to leave 2 weeks ago. She's selling the house. Mr. Peterson's frown deepened. That's extremely concerning because according to the final version of James's will, you have lifetime residency rights to that garden apartment. The house itself is not actually Amanda's to sell. The room seemed to tilt. I don't understand. Mrs. Wilson, your son, was a very astute financial planner. He created a trust worth approximately $7 million from his investments, life insurance, and other assets. The house is owned by the trust, not by Amanda personally. $7 million. The number was so large it seemed abstract, meaningless, but Amanda said, I'm afraid Amanda was shown only a preliminary version of the will at James's request. He came to me privately to execute the final documents. He slid a folder across the table. These are copies of the official documents. You'll see on page 3 the provision regarding your lifetime residency. I opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the dense legal text until I found the relevant section. To my mother, Flora Wilson, I grant lifetime residency rights to the garden apartment at 1842 Maple Street, Portland, Oregon. This right of residency cannot be terminated by any other beneficiary for any reason. The trust shall cover all property taxes, insurance, and major maintenance costs for the duration of her residency. Tears blurred my vision. Even in death, James was still taking care of me. There's more, Mr. Peterson said gently. The trust is primarily for Lucas's benefit to cover his education and provide for his future. But you, Mrs. Wilson, are named as co-trustee, along with Amanda. James was very clear that he wanted both his wife and his mother to have equal say in decisions regarding his son's inheritance. Amanda never mentioned any of this, I whispered. I'm not entirely surprised, he replied grimly. She came to see me the day after the funeral asking to see the will. I showed her the documents, explained the trust provisions, and informed her of her obligations as co-trustee. She was displeased, to put it mildly. She tried to access my bank accounts, I told him. Money disappeared. Mr. Peterson made a note. That's very troubling and potentially illegal. Rest assured she cannot access the trust funds so easily. James put several safeguards in place. What happens now? I asked Hope, beginning to blossom for the first time in weeks. Now, Mrs. Wilson, we take immediate legal action. I'll file for a temporary restraining order to prevent the sale of the house. Then we'll schedule a hearing to enforce the terms of the trust and your residency rights. His expression softened. And if you're amenable, I'd like to accompany you back to the house today to reinstate you in the garden apartment. Today, the prospect was both thrilling and terrifying. No time like the present, he replied with a small smile. I've taken the liberty of having the locks changed on the garden apartment. The keys are waiting at the courthouse with the TRO paperwork. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt a spark of the woman I used to be. The elementary school teacher who had managed classrooms of 30 children with firm kindness for 40 years. Let's do it, I said, straightening my shoulders. The judge who reviewed Mr. Peterson's emergency filing for the temporary restraining order was sympathetic to my situation. By noon, we had the signed order preventing Amanda from selling the house, along with new keys to the garden apartment and a court order affirming my right to live there. The sheriff will meet us at the house to ensure there's no resistance, Mr. Peterson explained as we drove to the property. It's standard procedure in these cases. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach as we pulled into the familiar driveway. A for sale sign stood in the front yard with a pending banner across it. 2 unfamiliar cars were parked in front, suggesting Amanda had visitors. The sheriff, a no-nonsense woman named Deputy Martinez, arrived moments after we did. Mr. Peterson briefed her on the situation while I waited in the car, heart pounding. Ready, Mrs. Wilson? Mr. Peterson asked, opening my door. I nodded, unable to speak. The 3 of us walked to the front door, the deputy leading the way. She knocked firmly. Amanda opened the door, her expression shifting from irritation to shock when she saw me standing between Mr. Peterson and the uniformed deputy. What is the meaning of this? She demanded. Mrs. Wilson, Deputy Martinez said formally, I'm here to enforce this court order granting you immediate access to the garden apartment at this address pursuant to the terms of the James Wilson Trust. She handed Amanda the paperwork, which Amanda glanced at before trying to hand it back. There must be some mistake. I'm the owner of this property. Actually, you're not, Mr. Peterson interjected smoothly. As I explained to you after the funeral, the house is owned by the trust James established. Your attempts to sell it constitute a violation of the trust terms. Amanda's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't just show up with some paperwork and expect to take over my home. No one is taking over your home, Mrs. Wilson, the deputy said calmly. The court order only pertains to the garden apartment, which, according to these legal documents, is guaranteed to Flora Wilson for her lifetime. I want to speak to my lawyer, Amanda snapped. By all means, Mr. Peterson replied. In the meantime, we'll proceed with reinstating Mrs. Wilson in her residence. I stood silently during this exchange, watching emotions chase across Amanda's face, anger, calculation, fear. Behind her, I could see her parents in the living room, Gerald already on his phone, presumably calling their attorney. As we walked around to the garden apartment entrance, I could hear Lucas calling from inside the house. Gamma, Gamma here. My heart clenched at the sound of his voice, but I forced myself to focus on the task at hand. One step at a time. The apartment was mostly as I had left it, though some of my furniture had been moved out, replaced with generic staging pieces. My personal items were still in boxes in the garage, which Miss Peterson noted and photographed as evidence. I'll need to retrieve my belongings from my car, I told them. And from the garage. Of course, the deputy nodded. I'll stay until you're settled. Moving back in took several hours. Justine arrived with my suitcases and boxes from her home, helping me rearrange furniture and unpack essentials. Amanda remained in the main house, occasionally visible through windows, talking animatedly on her phone. Late in the afternoon, as Justine and I were making up the bed with fresh sheets, there was a knock at my door. It was Amanda, her expression composed but strained. May I come in? She asked stiffly. I nodded, bracing myself. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly in her lap. My attorney has confirmed the validity of the trust documents, she said, each word seeming to cost her. I was unaware of the full extent of the arrangements James had made. You knew enough to try to force me out before I could discover them, I replied, keeping my voice level. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. I made some poor decisions in the aftermath of James's death. Grief can make people act irrationally. Grief doesn't explain emptying my bank accounts or telling me to learn to survive while I lived in my car for 2 weeks, I said quietly. Her eyes widened slightly. You were living in your car. I assumed you were staying with friends. Would it have mattered to you if you had known? She didn't answer directly. The point is, we need to find a way forward. For Lucas's sake. I agree, I said, surprising myself with how calm I felt. Lucas deserves to have both his mother and his grandmother in his life. Mr. Peterson tells me we're co-trustees of Lucas's inheritance, she continued. That means we'll need to consult each other on decisions about his education and welfare. As we should have been doing all along, I pointed out. Amanda's mouth tightened, but she nodded. My parents are returning to Chicago tomorrow. I've decided not to sell the house for now. She hesitated, then added, Lucas has been asking for you. Would you like to see him before dinner? It was an olive branch, small but significant. I would love that, I replied. After she left, Justine squeezed my hand. That went better than expected. It's a start, I agreed. There's a long way to go. Later that evening, I sat with Lucas on my small patio, reading him the same story I had been reading the day his father died. His small body felt right against mine, his questions about where I had been breaking my heart. I had to go away for a little while, I explained. But I'm back now and I'm not going anywhere. Promise, he asked, his eyes. So like James's, it made my chest ache. I promise, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. The next day, Mr. Peterson returned with more documents for me to sign as co-trustee of the trust. He explained the provisions in detail. The $7 million was invested conservatively, generating income that would pay for the house expenses, provide a monthly stipend to Amanda as Lucas's primary caregiver, and accumulate for Lucas's future education. There's also a provision for your financial security, he added, showing me the relevant section. James allocated $100,000 specifically for you, separate from the main trust assets. It's to be paid out immediately. I stared at the figure in disbelief. That's very generous. Your son wanted to ensure you would never be financially vulnerable, Mr. Peterson said with a gentle smile. He spoke very highly of you, Mrs. Wilson. He wanted to protect both you and Lucas. As I signed the necessary paperwork, I felt James's presence strongly, as if he were standing behind me, guiding my hand. He had anticipated problems I couldn't have imagined, and put safeguards in place to protect those he loved most. That evening, Amanda knocked on my door again. Her demeanor was different, less confrontational, almost vulnerable. May I speak with you? She asked. I invited her in, offering tea, which she accepted. We sat at my small kitchen table, the silence stretching between us, until she finally spoke. I need to explain some things, she began haltingly. It won't excuse what I did, but you deserve to know the truth. Over the next hour, a different picture emerged of the marriage I had thought was so perfect. Amanda revealed that she and James had been having serious problems for over a year. He had discovered she was having an emotional affair with a colleague, and while they were trying to work through it in counseling, the trust had been deeply damaged. The night before he died, we had a huge fight, she admitted, tears finally breaking through her composed facade. I told him I felt trapped in the marriage, that I had married too young, that I sometimes fantasized about taking Lucas and starting over somewhere new. The revelation stunned me. I had seen small tensions but had no idea the depth of their problems. When he died the next day, the guilt was overwhelming, she continued. Then finding out about the trust, the conditions, the fact that you had equal say in decisions about Lucas. It felt like he was controlling me from beyond the grave. I lashed out. I wanted to hurt someone the way I was hurting. And I was an easy target, I said quietly. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness. What I did to you was inexcusable. I just wanted you to understand that it wasn't really about you. It was about my guilt and grief and anger at James for dying before we could fix things. I sat with her words, feeling my own anger begin to soften around the edges. Not disappear, not yet, but soften enough to make room for compassion. "What happens now?" I asked, echoing my question to Mr. Peterson the day before. "I'm not moving to Chicago," she said. "Lucas needs stability, and despite everything, this is his home. He needs his grandmother." She took a deep breath. "If you're willing, I'd like to try to build a civil relationship, for Lucas's sake." It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was a beginning, a foundation on which we might eventually build something resembling trust. "I think we can do that," I replied, "for Lucas." The next morning, Amanda's parents departed for Chicago, their influence diminishing with their physical absence. The house felt lighter somehow, as if a storm cloud had passed. Lucas spent the morning with me, while Amanda met with her realtor to cancel the sale listing. "Gamma play trucks?" he asked, pulling his favorite toy from my bookshelf where I had kept it safe. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him, cherishing the simple joy of his company that I had feared was lost forever. When Amanda returned, she brought lunch for all three of us, a peace offering of sorts. We ate together on the patio, conversations stilted but civil. Lucas, oblivious to the tension, chattered happily about the squirrels in the yard and his new preschool friends. "I enrolled him at Sunnyside Preschool," Amanda told me. 3 mornings a week. "I thought maybe you might want to pick him up sometimes if you're feeling up to it." It was another small olive branch, and I accepted it graciously. I would love that. The truce was fragile, built on the foundation of necessary cooperation rather than genuine reconciliation. But for Lucas's sake, we both made an effort. The weeks that followed brought gradual changes. Amanda and I established a schedule for Lucas that gave me regular time with him while respecting her authority as his mother. The legal formalities of the trust were finalized, and Mr. Peterson helped me set up a separate account for the money James had left specifically for me. With financial security restored, I focused on rebuilding my life. I retrieved my car from Justine's apartment complex, thanking her profusely for her kindness when I had nothing. "You would have done the same for me," she said, simply hugging me tight. "Besides, you're stuck with me now. I expect weekly coffee dates at minimum." True to her word, Justine became a regular fixture in my new life. She would visit for tea, bringing homemade cookies or fresh flowers from her small garden. Her warmth and straightforward kindness were balms to my still healing heart. 1 month after my return to the garden apartment, Amanda came to me with an unexpected proposal. "I've been thinking about going back to work part-time," she said hesitantly. "With the trust covering our basic expenses, I don't need to financially, but I think it would be good for me. The pharmaceutical company has offered me a position with flexible hours." "That sounds like a good step forward," I replied, sensing there was more to the conversation. "I was wondering if you would be willing to watch Lucas on the days I work. He would be in preschool for part of the time, but I'd need someone for the afternoons." She paused, then added, "I'd pay you, of course." I shook my head. "I don't want payment for spending time with my grandson. But yes, I would be happy to help." This new arrangement brought another shift in our dynamic. As Amanda reconnected with her professional identity, some of the brittleness seemed to fade from her personality. She was still reserved with me, careful to maintain boundaries, but the outright hostility had dissipated. 3 months after James's death, I joined a grief support group at the suggestion of my doctor, who was concerned about the toll the stress had taken on my health. The cough I had developed while living in my car had lingered, requiring antibiotics and follow-up appointments. The group met weekly in a church basement not far from our house. There I found a community of people who understood the complexity of grief, the way it ebbs and flows, striking at unexpected moments. They listened without judgment as I shared my story, offering not platitudes but genuine empathy. Through their support, I began to process not just the loss of James, but the betrayal that had followed the homelessness, the fear, and ultimately the vindication. One elderly man, Walter, who had lost his wife of 52 years, became a particular friend, his gentle humor helping me find my way back to laughter. "Grief doesn't follow a timetable," he told me one evening as we shared coffee after a meeting. "And neither does healing. You just wake up one day and realize you've been carrying it differently without noticing the change." 6 months after James's death, I used part of the money he had left me to establish a small foundation in his name. The James Wilson Housing Security Fund provided emergency assistance to elderly individuals facing homelessness or housing insecurity. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was helping others avoid the very situation I had endured, but it gave meaning to my suffering and honored James's protective nature. The foundation work gave me a new purpose, a reason to get up each morning beyond my love for Lucas. I partnered with local senior centers and social service agencies, sharing my story selectively to raise awareness about the vulnerability of older adults, particularly women, to sudden housing crises. Justine volunteered her time to the foundation, helping with fundraising events, and often bringing along other waitresses from the diner who had their own stories of financial precarity. Together, we created a network of support for those who might otherwise fall through the cracks of existing systems. Amanda, to my surprise, made a significant donation to the foundation on the 1-year anniversary of James's death. She didn't attend the memorial service I organized, sending Lucas with me instead, but the donation felt like acknowledgement of some kind. Our relationship remained complicated. There were good days when we could sit together at Lucas's preschool graduation, both smiling proudly as he marched across the tiny stage in his construction paper cap. There were difficult days when old resentments surfaced, usually triggered by decisions about Lucas or mentions of James. But gradually, incrementally, we established a new normal. Amanda eventually started dating again, introducing me to David, a kind widower with a daughter a few years older than Lucas, before she introduced him to Lucas himself. I appreciated the consideration, recognizing it as the respect it was meant to be. 2 years after James's death, as I sat on my patio watching Lucas, now 5, chase butterflies through my flower garden, I realized Walter had been right. The grief hadn't disappeared, but I was carrying it differently. It had become part of me, like an old injury that aches in cold weather but no longer prevents movement. I had created a meaningful life in the aftermath of loss. My garden apartment, once a symbol of dependence, had become a sanctuary of my own making, filled with books and plants and the artwork Lucas created for me. My weekly coffee dates with Justine, my foundation work, my grief support group friends, and most importantly, my relationship with Lucas, all combined to form a tapestry of connection that sustained me. Amanda and I would never be close, but we had found a way to coexist peacefully. She had kept her promise to remain in Portland, ensuring Lucas maintained his relationship with me. When she eventually married David, combining their families in a new home across town, she honored the trust terms by renting out the main house rather than selling it, allowing me to remain in the garden apartment. Life had taken an unimaginable turn on that Tuesday afternoon when the hospital called, but I had survived it. More than survived, I had rebuilt. The homeless woman sobbing in a diner bathroom would hardly recognize the person I had become, a woman with purpose and community and wisdom, born of suffering. As I watch Lucas running through the garden, I sometimes glimpse James in the curve of his smile, the thoughtful furrow of his brow. My son lives on in his child and in the lessons his life and death taught me. Life can take everything from you in an instant, but it's your choice whether to remain broken. True strength isn't in fighting back with anger or bitterness, but in rebuilding with wisdom and kindness. I lost my son, but I found my voice and purpose, and that would make James proud. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a devastating loss? What helped you find your strength again? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more tales of resilience and renewal. Remember to share with someone who might need to be reminded of their own strength today. Thank you for listening, and may you find peace in your own journey, whatever challenges you face.